welcome to episode 456 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Grace Winburn.
Michael O'Malley.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we will continue our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1962's Harakiri. We will not be performing Harakiri, though. We will continue to do Cinematary after this.
It was discussed.
We'll just
and
be like
voted
that
on.
first guy in the movie where we're just trying to get money to do
Yeah.
it.
We'll bring that up at the end when we get to the Patreon portion. We'll just be like, we just want your money. We don't
We'll
really
put out our Venmos.
Yeah, we're just here to get the money. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into it. I'll start us off. I have 2 new releases that I caught. The first one I will talk about is They Cloned Tyrone, which is just popped onto. Well, I think it popped on the Netflix the week that Barbie and Oppenheimer came out, which is just a very inopportune time to like come out and try to capture attention. But this is by I think this is his first feature. I think he's done some shorts, but Jewel Taylor, who wrote and directed this, and it stars John Boyega, Tiana Paris, Jamie Foxx, and Kiefer Sutherland, and it's there very much like riffing off of the blaxploitation genre, movies like that. It like even just the look of the film. I probably should have looked it up. I think it is filmed on film. But I hope it is because it looks good. It looks like actual film. I hope it wasn't like some kind of digital filter. But they try to make it look like it's this blaxploitation film from like the 60s and 70s.
Like Black Dynamite.
Yeah, to a degree. This one's a little bit more serious than Black Dynamite, but also is just a very funny movie. But it's kind of it's blaxploitation, but like with a side of Invasion of the Body Snatchers or They Live. So if you're into that combo, that's what this movie is. It takes place. I can't remember specifically where it's at in the U.S., but it's in kind of the projects of this city. John Boyega is kind of a drifter, like seems like somewhat drug dealer, just kind of just wanderer about town. Jamie Foxx is a pimp, and Tiana Paris plays one of his women of the night. And the first kind of day plays out. John Boyega's character is like going through the day, interacting with people, but he like stops and like beats up this guy who's selling drugs and like steals the drugs from him. And the guy's like, "Oh, I'm gonna tell whatever the guy's name was that you did this," and he's just like, "I don't really care." And so it catches up to him later in the day. He goes to visit Jamie Foxx's character to pick up some money, and when he's leaving the motel where Jamie Foxx is, the guy from the boss who he stole the drugs from earlier finds him and shoots him in his car, and you're kind of like, oh, like this is this. But then in somewhat of like a Groundhog Day situation, he like wakes up the next morning and seems to kind of like be a little bit off, but not realize that he's been killed. And through a confluence of different events that it's not really worth getting into to kind of take away from the movie, they find out that the government has been cloning members of this projects area in this part of town in a way to not to get into like into the whole logistics of it, because it does kind of get into, I think it's the case with a lot of these types of movies. It does get into kind of funny science, and like it gets a little bit lost in the sauce when it comes to like trying to explain all of this stuff. It reminds me a little bit of something like a recent Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie, The World's End by Edgar Wright. Something like that, where you just have like this cloned town that's all coming after like the 3 main characters of this movie, but the government's like covering it up in order to test on the black people living in this part of town and run tests and like kind of keep them in line. And so a lot of the movie then becomes them uprising against the government, to shut all of this stuff down. And it plays on gentrification and a lot of different aspects of, the government just not really caring about a lot of Black Americans, or just, the whole point that they're kind of making is that, they're just they're just kind of using them as these test subjects. And so they have to rise up against the Kiefer Sutherlands and and take them down. But it does have like this kind of, like I said, it's very much like in this blaxploitation vein, with a little bit of like They Live, things like that. It's very funny. Jamie Foxx, this is a good Jamie Foxx role. Like he's really hamming it up, having a good time. John Boyega, he's somebody who it seems much more in line with like Attack the Block, the movie that kind of got him on the radar before he got stuck in the Star Wars machine. And he
was on Skins too, right? Like or was it Skins or was it Misfits?
One of those, yeah.
He was on he was on like one of those.
It feels more akin to like the roles he was doing before he got caught in like Star Wars and things like that. But he's really good in the lead role. It's very funny. Tiana Paris, who is somebody she's gotten stuck in like the Marvel machine now, but this seems much more of like she gets these roles that she can like kind of chew on. This one reminds me of just in terms of like the intensity and like that she and the kind of charm that she brings of something like Chirac, the Spike Lee movie that she leads. This one and Chirac, I think, are two of her better roles for sure. Like she's just able to like really create a character. Like she really just has this great personality to her, and seems like she's like given much more freedom to like build a character rather than like just kind of be person B in some Marvel television show or movie or something like that. So I mean, all three leads are really fun. I think that the blaxploitation it works. You have like all of these very like entertaining side characters that they're kind of running into along the way. A lot of like the sci-fi stuff works, like the ending scene when like everybody comes together in the neighborhood to like fight off the government. Is kind of fantastic. And like I don't think the social commentary is it's solid. It's not too bad. It's not even really on the level of like stuff that they would do in like Pam Grier movies and things like that, where you would kind of get this. It would like speak to an issue that was affecting the Black community at that time. This one definitely like it kind of it like the government is like working out of these hubs like. It has one of the entrances to the government, like the space where they're like doing the cloning is like in the church in that part of town, or the convenience store or the liquor store. One of them is like in one of the kind of flop houses, like the drug house that they end up at. And so it's like these points of contact that like the government is running in order to kind of keep the people in the neighborhood kind of stuck in the neighborhood rather than like going out and kind of trying to start a new life. The Tiana Paris character talks about how at one point how she wanted to become a writer and a journalist and wanted to like go work at the Washington Post and kind of be more than just stuck in the same neighborhood anymore, but she ended up, because of different circumstances, ended up kind of in the life that she's in now and staying where she grew up. And you can kind of sense that with the John Boyega character too. But yeah, I think it's definitely, it's a very assured, like confident first feature for Jewel Taylor. Like I hope that he's able to make more movies, and make movies kind of like this. That, I mean, this one, I think it's a little, it stays a little bit too long. It's like, it's 2 hours. I think it probably could have been a stronger 90-minute movie. I think there's a little bit of fat that you can kind of cut out of it. Like I said, I think it spends too much time like trying to kind of explain the science when you're just kind of like, yeah, just like have fun, like just kind of play with it and like allow that to lead to like comedy and action and things like that. But yeah, They Cloned Tyrone. It's on Netflix. It's easily one of the like better looking non like auteur, like, you know, it's not, you know, non like Noah Baumbach, I'm trying to think of others, like, you know, the people like when they started like giving auteurs you know, money to make movies on Netflix. This one is probably one of the better like non-auteur, like where they, you know, they actually gave a lot of money. Like this one looks really nice. It doesn't feel and look like a Netflix movie. It's entertaining and sticks with you, which is new for Netflix movies, I would say. So but yeah, definitely check it out. It's a fun time. It's a good little like, it's a good 2-hour watch.
Is there anything like scary about it, or is it just like a fun little comedy? Because it sounds like there is like a little bit. I mean, it's already playing on like the historical precedents of like Tuskegee and like the government like injecting Black Americans and, you know, testing them and then like putting
it's got a little bit of like kind of. Yeah, it's got a little bit of body horror and things like that, but I wouldn't describe it as like a horror movie. It's more of like a exploitation film or like an action sci-fi film. That's why it's much more in line with like They Live or something like that. That's like less scary and more just like kind of sci-fi stuff. Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, no, it's fine. No, it's not a super scary movie.
Okay.
But no, I mean, Tuskegee and stuff like that's definitely like kind of what it's getting at.
There, like, you know.
It is, yeah, no, and like I said, I think it could have been like the story could have been more streamlined. Like that's something that I like about, you know, a lot of Pam Grier's movies. Like they bake that stuff in there, but it feels like a very like streamlined. You know, the action and stuff of it is paramount over anything, and like this one's not that it steers away from that, but I feel like it kind of gets lost in that and forgets to like be a fun movie sometimes. It kind of gets to a point where it drags a little bit, and I'm like, yeah, like I think it would have been better as like a 90-minute movie where you could have just kind of like got into the science of it, and you could have still made like this, like the kind of social cause, you know, the social points that you want to make without like spending too long kind of focusing on that and less time like getting into kind of the comedy and action that is like the parts that you really enjoy. Like it's a like I hope I've emphasized like it's a very, very funny movie. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of fun. The other one I want to talk about is called this one came out at Sundance. It's called Shortcomings. It's directed by Randall Park, who he's probably most recognizable. He played the father in Fresh Off the Boat, the ABC comedy, and he's had like a little bit parts in different movies. He's popped up in a lot of like Judd Apatow, Seth Rogen movies. I think he was doing Marvel movies and stuff as well. Has done stuff, you know, like that. But this one is his first directorial film. I don't think it's based off of I believe a graphic novel of the same name. But did he write the script too? No, he didn't write the script. But yeah, it's premiered at Sundance. It stars Justin Min, who is for those who have seen After Yang, he plays Yang in After Yang and is very good in this. And then Sherry Cola, who was in that movie Joyride earlier this year, and she plays his best friend, is a lot of fun.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you say Cherry Cola?
Her name's Sherry Cola. Sherry.
Oh, okay. All right, never mind.
It's a great name. No, it's a great name. I liked it. Yeah. But pretty much the movie, Ben is like he went to film school, wanted to be a filmmaker. It didn't really work out. But it is very much like a unavailable man watching Criterion movies. I was telling Grace before we recorded, like there's a scene in it where he has this longtime girlfriend. And she like comes in the room and he's watching the 400 Blows, and she's like, "Hey, like you're gonna come to bed?" And he's like, "Yeah, maybe in a little bit." And she's like, "Well, you know, like you can come to bed and we don't have to go to sleep at the, you know, necessarily. We can, you know, do other stuff." And he was just like, yeah, no, I'll be here in a little bit. And like he's like watching the 400 Blows, and like on the table next to him there's a copy of Tampopo and Francis Ha, and I was like, damn, like what a fucking burn. Like and he has and like, you know, he has a house poster in the apartment, like there's a lot of like
this movie sounds like it's out to draw blood, to be
honestly,
honest.
My kind of man.
But like it's really it's like really, really funny details. It's less like, it's like, you know, he's like name drop. There's some name dropping of directors and stuff like that, but it also just has like really nice details that you're like, yeah, like everybody knows who this person is, has run into this person before. And it's really funny about that. Like, I do like the different movies he's watching though. At one point he's watching Ozu's Good Morning, and like I was with a friend and I was like, I love that movie. It is a great movie. Honestly, it's not a film bro movie though. I'm like, that's fine. Like that's an okay movie. But anyway, so he has this longtime girlfriend. She works at a local Asian American film festival. Clearly, like I said, he's wanting to be a filmmaker. Is like really like not doing anything with that. His day job is like managing an art house movie theater in Berkeley, California, and his girlfriend kind of seems to be getting tired of he's very negative. Like the first time you meet him, they're at her film festival, and the first thing that you see is this movie within a movie that stars Stephanie Hugh from Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Robbie Chang, the comedian, and it seems like it's kind of like a riff off of Crazy Rich Asians, and so it's kind of like this blockbustery romance movie with these two Asian leads. And like the movie ends and all the people in the theater cheer, and then you see Ben, the main character, and he's just like sitting there just like fuck. And then like they go into the lobby and everybody's all excited about it, and he's just kind of like playing nice, and then he leaves with his girlfriend. She's like, what do you think of it? And he was just like, yeah, that was awful. And then they have this whole discussion about like like the movie, like the movie's like, her point is that the movie is good because it like is this representation, and so as you know, for him, like that, like the movies like this needs to be successful with Asian leads so that then he can kind of make the movies that he wants to, because you got to like capture this like wider audience. And like at that point I'm just like, oh my god, like I've had conversations like that in this goddamn podcast.
I mean, I was about to say, are you sure you didn't just watch a Cinematary YouTube
I kind of felt like it was like at the beginning I was just like, oh my god, like I was like, I feel like we're like in an episode of Cemetery right now. Like this guy honestly could have, like, if he wants to join the pod, he would fit in. Except I think that we're much nicer people than he is, because he really fucked up because his girlfriend is very attractive and seems really nice, and he's an asshole to her, and I didn't understand that.
Zach is gonna scoop her up.
I'd scoop her the hell up. Let me tell you.
I heard you like film. I heard you like film boys, baby.
There you go.
I'm here for you.
Let's go watch Good Morning and watch some farting kids with. Anyway, so then she gets an internship working at a film festival in New York, and so she's kind of like, hey, like, let's put a pause on things, and I'm gonna go to New York for 3 months. And a lot of time that he outside of like working, he eats. He like goes and hangs out with his best friend Alice, who's played by Sherry Cola, who's a lesbian and a grad student, and they just kind of have like very similar, like their sense of humor is very similar. She's also kind of like kind of has like this negative, crass sense of humor as well. And the rest of the movie is just kind of him dealing, like trying to kind of like figure out it feels like the I think you should leave sketch, like figure out what you do type thing. He like is kind of feeling like, oh, like I'm gonna go date somebody else because she's just not getting me. She's, for whatever reason, she's just it's her fault type situation. And like he like has this like kind of obsession with blonde white women, which is interesting, and it kind of comes into play later. But he like tries to date this girl who is working at the theater with him, and that kind of falls apart. That's also kind of a funny character because she's like this early 20s experimental artist, and like she has like this thing that she's working on where she like takes pictures every morning after she pees, and she's like it's gonna be like this experience art type thing, and he's just like, oh, you're insane. And she's like, what? And he's like, oh, nothing. This is incredible. It's about consumerism or something, And then there's another girl that he meets at a party, and like they date for a little while, but then she's kind of like, yeah, like, I'm going to go back to the person I was with. Like we were able to kind of work things out, and he like blows up at her. And so it's an interesting movie because he sucks the entire time. He fucking sucks the entire time. And like, he's kind of stagnated, while even his friend Alice, who you meet, and she feels like very much like akin with like his his whole life starts, she finds somebody to start to kind of grow out of the kind of stuckness that she's in, and so he's just somebody who's stuck, who won't acknowledge that he's stuck, and that just kind of erupts into different outbursts at different people, and that's a lot of the movie. I thought it was good though. I thought, he is just kind of he's a very frustrating character, but I mean, I think Justin Min does a great job with it. I think the beginning of the first 15-20 minutes of the movie, I think are the strongest, because he's a jerk, but they're able to kind of work it in as like a very, like, it's very, like, a lot of the bits where he's being a jerk are also very funny, and like it would have been like, I would have like been like, yeah, like if you could have kept that going for most of the film, so you're kind of like, he's an asshole, but I am like laughing at this only to like pull the rug out, and then he's just an asshole and he's not funny, because they definitely do that. I just felt like they don't, the kind of real strong comedy of it kind of I think evaporates pretty early on. The Alice character, though, is consistently funny throughout. I feel like she could have been given kind of a little bit more to do. She's, whenever she shows up, is easily like kind of scene stealing the whole thing. But again, like, first time director, I think it's pretty solid. It's well shot. Like, I think he does some interesting stuff with the camera, just in, like, how he utilizes some close ups and some shot reverse shots and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's very much like a Sundance movie, but I think it has some interesting things to say. I think he definitely, I'll say, like, he doesn't really, like, it ends and he doesn't really like kind of get vindicated, or he's very much left in like a, it seems like you're starting to acknowledge that you need to change, but it's definitely not immediately happening, and there's kind of a long journey ahead. But I think it's fun. I think the performers are all really strong. It is frequently pretty funny. Like, they don't get enough scenes, but like they have the two characters who are like the concession stand workers at the movie theater that he works at, in the handful of scenes that they get are pretty funny. But overall, I thought pretty solid. This is one, it's kind of one of those small, like, I see it popping up on like a Hulu or something eventually, and it's a good little 90-minute comedy. Good to see. So, Shortcomings, thumbs up.
Coming soon.
It's here, so.
Oh.
But I'm going to go ahead.
Here it is.
I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to Michael, and we'll talk about something starkly more serious than anything I've talked about so far.
Yeah, speaking of shortcomings, have you thought about the shortcomings of us inventing nuclear weapons? You probably have, because we just talked about Oppenheimer last week, or 2 weeks ago, whenever that was. And if you have the Criterion channel, which I recently got for my birthday, thanks, Rebecca.
Shout out Rebecca.
You will have this documentary pushed on you by the Criterion channel, which is called The Day After Trinity, and it's a 1981 documentary that is, like, I kid you not, like the documentary form of the first 2/3 of the Nolan Oppenheimer, like beat for beat, really, except without like the time jumping. It doesn't really have a lot of the like McCarthy Strauss stuff. It touches on that at the very end, but otherwise, like, all of the information that is in this documentary, with a few exceptions, is in the Nolan film. And I know that that's ostensibly based on a book, American Prometheus, but I have a hard time imagining Nolan did not watch this movie. But it's good. What's kind of cool about it is because they made it in 1981, a lot of the people who were involved with the Manhattan Project were still alive. Not Oppenheimer himself, but like Oppenheimer's brother is in this, and a whole bunch of other people you'll recognize either from history or from just the movie Oppenheimer. So, for instance, the Chevalier of the Chevalier incident, like that friend of his that watches his kid for a while in the movie, he's in this movie interviewed. Like I said,
I like Chevalier from the Chevalier incident.
I don't know how to pronounce his first name. It's Haakon. Hakon. I don't know. Also, well, I mean, just like a whole bunch of people. So, like, what's the interesting thing I think that this documentary does is allow you to actually see these people who worked on the Manhattan Project reflecting over the legacy of the Manhattan Project. And so you have a lot of the stuff, like I said, that's conveyed in the movie. Like, they talk about Oppenheimer's involvement with, like, campus organizing and kind of his dalliance with left-wing politics. They talk about his, like, the kind of, like, atmosphere in Los Alamos, and, like, which is apparently, like, a big party atmosphere. There's this one anecdote this one dude says where it's like, they wouldn't let us have alcohol to spike the punch, and so we used, like, lab alcohol, which is 200 proof. Then they talk kind of about that, and then, like, you know, obviously the Trinity test happens, and, you know, in short work, the U.S. government bombs, you know, Japan twice, and immediately that's about halfway through the documentary. I mean, immediately the tone of the documentary just becomes extraordinarily grim, like, as it should. But, like, these people who worked on it, like, you can just see in their faces, like, just the immense, like, psychological toll that having to reckon with, like, their role in nuclear warfare has taken on them. And a lot of them have, like, their kind of, like, justifications, like, oh, well, I just didn't think about you know, the danger of this. Nobody was thinking about this at the time. There's, like, some people who, like, say stuff like that. There's this one dude who is, like, scary as hell, who, like, actually went to Hiroshima after the bomb and did, like, studies on, like, you know, well, what is the after effects of the bomb and all this sort of stuff. And he was like, he gives this really chilling little monologue in which he talks about, like, yeah, it was kind of weird. No one seemed to care that we were there. Like, they were all just, you know, at first it was, like, really empty, you know, where the bomb dropped. And then when we started seeing people, they just seemed so dazed. They didn't even seem mad at us for having dropped the bomb. And then he, like, pulls out this window, or not a window, he pulls out this, like chunk of brick, and there's, like, ash on the brick, and he's like, this is from a schoolhouse in Hiroshima, and I like this because you can see the mark that the flash from the bomb left. And so if you had a protractor, you could figure out the angle of you know, the refraction of the light, and figure out, like, at what height the bomb was dropped. Like, he just goes on this thing, and he's just, like, sitting there holding it, like, in his office or whatever this is. And then obviously quite a few of them are horrified about, like, the bomb and everything too. And the movie ends with, like, a video footage of Oppenheimer in his, like, post-war, I don't know where this footage came from, but it was, like, footage from, like, post-war, like, his like, anti-nuclear warfare stage, where he's, like, an activist for that. And someone asks him, like, well, what can be done to stop nuclear war? And he's like, nothing can be done now. Like, the only thing that could have been done was to stop it the day after Trinity. And now that it's not, that's the end. So, like, that's where the title of the movie comes from. And it's extraordinarily bleak. The movie also, like, near the end of it, has a bunch of footage, almost like the end of Doctor Strangelove, where all the bombs are going off. It's got a lot of test footage of, like, atomic weapons, and then they go to, like, hydrogen bombs, you know, because, like, if you remember from the movie, that was a big sticking point for Oppenheimer after the war, is that we didn't need hydrogen bombs. And so, like, you see all this test footage, and they show you, like, basically in scale, like, these explosions, because, like, the explosion that they show you that was, like, basically analogous to, like, what was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you see it and you're like, wow, that's a big explosion. And then all of a sudden you're seeing these hydrogen explosions, and you can tell the camera is panned miles back. Like, it is, you know, you're looking at a field with, like, the atomic weapon explosion, and with the hydrogen bomb, you're, like, zoomed back, and you're seeing, like, a whole, like an island, like, it's an entire, like, landmass.
Were those the ones that they tested, like, in the water, like in the ocean?
Yeah, I don't know if it was, like, the Bikini Atoll or something like that, but it was, yeah. And so you can just, like, tell, like, because they show in succession the growing explosions of these weapons, and it's really horrifying because the first one looks huge. You're like, dang, that's big. And then they just keep getting bigger. At any rate, I think it's worth watching. It's 90 minutes, 90-ish minutes, maybe it's 100 minutes. Regardless, it's breezy compared to Oppenheimer in terms of length. But I think that like there's real value in, even if you already know all the material from Oppenheimer or history, I think there's real value in the fact that these guys were interviewed. Like just actually seeing them and like kind of like watching them answer these questions and like kind of squirm in their seats. Like there's something about that that's not really captured in the Nolan film, which is like really laser focused on Oppenheimer and his subjectivity. So if you have Criterion Channel, it's worth a watch. The style itself of the documentary is very much like PBS style, like you have interviews and you have archival footage, and there's some cool archival footage though. They have footage of them assembling the bomb for the Trinity test in color, which is kind of neat. But I mean, it feels like you're watching a public television documentary, and it was I think that's where it premiered, was in like California public television. But it's worth a watch. Like it's really good. So it's on Criterion Channel. If you're ready to be bummed out by the prospect of the annihilation of the human race because of some fucking asshole scientists and the American imperialist project. So
what did it change or alter like how you felt about Oppenheimer after? I mean, you mentioned a little bit like the comparison to it, but like what did you think about like the narrative film after watching that?
It's like, I guess what Oppenheimer, the Nolan film, offers that this doesn't is the kind of like the character study element, of like Oppenheimer and his psychology, which this movie doesn't exactly capture. Like you get some of it, but I think though, like the kind of ethical stuff that the movie tries to explore regarding like complicity in the Manhattan Project and like whether or not you can pursue theory without enabling people to put it into practice, and that's all those sort of things. Like I think this movie is a much better engagement with those because it's exclusively engaged in that. It doesn't get kind of like distracted by some of the stuff that the Christopher Nolan film does. And I think that like after watching this, I wasn't like completely in the bag for everything Oppenheimer was doing, but I think like when it comes down to what
No, it's just funny. Like
it's just right. Yeah, I disagree with the book too. Yeah, I'm
we're
not
with you,
totally
man.
sold.
We're with you. That's not controversial.
I mean the film.
No, yeah, absolutely, Michael. Please, you should say it.
That nuclear weapons are dangerous. No, but like I'm in the film.
Your nuclear hot
take. No, I meant the film. The film Oppenheimer, I wasn't completely on board with like every single thing that it went with. But I think that this movie, the documentary, has made me less. It's made me feel like that its engagement with like the kind of like more ethical and political issues is a lot thinner. I think this documentary is a lot more complex with that.
The thing I was thinking about with Oppenheimer, because I listened to the Film Comment podcast talking about it, and they had two people who were very like really did not like the movie, and like we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Like the thing I think that also like I feel like this definitely has like some like the documentary it definitely has like some meat to it that is left out of the movie just on the basis of like carrying along a narrative. Like you just kind of have to drop some stuff. But like the thing I think that also sits with Oppenheimer is just it's why Christopher Nolan's like was the perfect person to do it, is because he just really can kind of capture like he can put you in the seat for like just to kind of experience like a lot of that the test and like the aftermaths of the test and like like Oppenheimer and the crowd, like just those kind of very like sensory like movie things. Like I think done by like others, it probably wouldn't have had like that same impact and probably would have been a lesser movie. And so yeah, like I'm like, yeah, like there could have been some more narrative holes filled and things like that. Like, you know, you definitely could have filled some stuff out. But like just like at the end of the day, it also is like a movie, and like as a movie, it definitely like holds your attention in a way.
No, yeah, for sure. Yeah, in terms of film craft, I mean, the Nolan's Oppenheimer movie is, you know, extremely ambitious and energetic and riveting, especially with the material that this documentary covers. Like, it's kind of interesting. Like, I think the strongest material in Oppenheimer the movie is all the stuff at Los Alamos, and like that's most of what this documentary covers. And if you're just comparing film styles, I mean, like, you know, there's no question that Nolan's film is like more cinematic, but I mean, Nolan's film is also trying to say something, and I think that this movie, the documentary, says the same thing on it maybe says a more focused thing than the Nolan movie, and as a result, it feels more layered. And I mean, like, so there's like that kind of ongoing discourse about like, does Oppenheimer the movie truly reckon with like the kind of damage that the bomb does? And what people are usually meaning by that is there's that scene where they're watching footage of the damage from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and you never see what's on the footage, right? All you see is Oppenheimer's very troubled reaction to it, right? And a lot of people have said, like, why are they protecting viewers from like the damage that the bomb did, you know, like, shouldn't we see that? And there's an argument that would be exploitative to include it. But I think that one interesting thing that this documentary does that's like maybe changed a little bit how I thought of that, because I would be one of the people who would have said like it would have been exploitative to have like pictures of burned Japanese people in that movie. But this documentary doesn't really show. It shows a little bit of like the people who were hurt by the bomb. Like, there's a little bit of archival footage of that, but mostly it's these scientists recounting their trip to Japan, and their narrative, I think, really says a lot about not just the damage that the bomb did to Japan, but the kind of the ways in which like the West positioned itself toward that damage. And that's really interesting, and that's something that the movie just kind of glances off of. The Oppenheimer movie just kind of glances off of, and like there's just stuff like that where it's, you know, the same material and a lot of times the very same facts, but the way that it's presented is in a way that feels a lot more rigorous. And again, like, that's not the only thing to get out of the movie is ethics and politics. You know, that's not everything that Oppenheimer the Nolan movie is doing, and it's got stuff to offer besides that. But I think this documentary is probably best used as like a companion to the Nolan film rather than like a replacement of it.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's. I've been meaning to watch it. I think I might see Oppenheimer a second time, and then I was gonna maybe go through that in a couple. I definitely want to watch like something like Hiroshima, Mon Amour, or I forgot what the title is, but Kurosawa made a movie that's like directly reckoning with the aftermath of the bomb drops and stuff like that. So a lot of those are actually on Criterion Channel also.
There's also a YouTube video that I'm only bringing up because I think we had something by this YouTuber when we did our YouTube cinema series, but B, it's like a feature length. It's like a 2-hour YouTube video by the YouTuber Sean, which basically walks through like a top to bottom, like debunking the idea that like dropping the bomb was anything other than like a kind of an act against the Soviet Union, basically. You know, like
yeah. It was a dick measuring thing. Like, let's just get it down to its base.
It was 100% like the United States showing, look, anyone else who wants to go to war with us, look what we just did to this guy. You know that. So anyway, like, but it goes through like a lot of archival data, and you know, going back to like actual documents, like kind of mapping the logic that at the time was used to justify dropping the bomb. And again, that's like a really good. Like very academic and pretty dry, to be honest, but like very like, you know, if you're interested in this sort of stuff, that's another good companion to Oppenheimer, because a lot of the points get brought up in Oppenheimer, again, in a very brief way. And if you're interested in like burrowing in, it's there.
Cool. Now I'm definitely hoping to watch that at some point. Get in the mood for it,
Yeah. Who's not in the mood to watch stuff about the Manhattan Project?
I mean, I don't know. I woke up and watched the movie we're about to talk about in part 2. I woke up, and watched that starting at like 9:30 this morning. It was an interesting watch, to have like my coffee and some breakfast and be watching that. But we'll get into that in a little bit.
100% fewer samurai fights in The Day After Trinity.
I'm sure there were. Right? Exactly. On that note, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back talking about some samurai fights in part 2 with Harakiri after this. Back with part 2 of episode 456 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1962's Harakiri. Directed by Masaka Kobayashi from a script by Shinobu Hashimoto, the film stars Tatsuya Nakade, Shima Iwashita, Akira Ishihama, and Tetsuro Tamba. Aging samurai Hanshiro Sugomo arrives at the home of Kageu Sato and asks to commit a ritual suicide on the property, which Sato thinks is a ploy to gain pity and a job. Sato tells Sugumo of another samurai who threatened suicide as a stratagem, only to be forced to follow through on the task. When Sugumo reveals that samurai was his son-in-law, the disclosure sets off a fierce conflict. When asked about the theme of his film, Kobayashi said, quote, "All of my pictures are concerned with resisting an entrenched power. That's what Harakiri is about, of course, and rebellion as well. I suppose I've always challenged authority." Although Kobayashi grew up in a quiet fishing village and went to a reputable university, he was a born rebel. He spent most of his career criticizing Japanese society, which resulted in censorship and underrated masterpieces like Harakiri. In 1942, Kobayashi was drafted into the Japanese Imperial Army. He disapproved of their actions, however. In protest of the war effort, he refused to become an officer. This was his way of condemning the military class that dragged Japan into the Pacific War. As such, Kobayashi faced the dangers of war head-on and was taken prisoner towards the end of World War II. After that, he spent a year in a detention camp. Fortunately, he survived to criticize Japanese society after the war. In the post-war years, Kobayashi was the first director to openly criticize Japanese militarism and the atrocities that occurred in China before World War II. In particular, his film trilogy, The Human Condition, voiced concern about the further course of humankind. Kobayashi's nonconformist attitude was at odds with the Japanese film studios and remained so till the end. In other words, his filmmaking career was an uphill battle. His work was impeccable, though, and Harakiri was the pinnacle of it all. It was Kobayashi's first attempt at the genre, the samurai genre, but the style of Harakiri impacted film fans forever after. Presumably, Kobayashi got the affinity for nature photography from his upbringing in Otaru, a rural seaside Hokkaido town. Harakiri was characterized by low-paced camera work, shots from above, symmetrical composition, and stark lighting. At the time, Kobayashi felt that his pursuit of realism had gone as far as possible. He was ready to explore unknown territories. This freed him to take inspiration from theatrical art forms such as kabuki, no theater, and scroll paintings. Kobayashi coupled his inspirations from traditional Japanese art with old-fashioned dialogue-based storytelling. This time around, his inner rebel opposed realistic film conventions, which was further strengthened by the traditional tunes of biwa. Harakiri was set in 1630, 40 years before the Meiji Restoration in 1868, and the downfall of the, or that would be 1768 anyway, and the downfall of the Takagawa shogunate. Kobayashi chose the 1630s to emphasize that the Japanese system was corrupt before Tokugawa took power. Japan was peaceful in the 1630s. The need for samurais declined long before the Meiji Restoration. Kobayashi's condemnation of the Iyi clan symbolized something more significant. It voiced opposition against something rotten in the Empire of Japan. Something vile stunk up Japanese society before the Tokugawa shogunate, and Kobayashi saw it in post-war Japan society as well. His finger pointed at unquestioning submission, strict hierarchies, and financial cliques built on corrupt feudalist values. The New York Times in 1964 said, another grizzled, grumpy, and growling unemployed samurai of the sort that we've seen prowling around the premises in any number of post-war Japanese costume films is the hero of Harakiri, the first Shambara sword-fighting film directed by Masaki Kobayashi. But this samurai is different from most of the old warriors we've seen stomping their feet and swishing their swords in the particular type of Japanese picture that is comparable to the American Western film. Possibly, there is some significance in this drama that pertains to recent years. Some comment on the antiquated rituals and false heroics of a militaristic caste. If so, it is vague and mushy. Mainly impressive about the film are the strange plastic rhythms that move in it and the exquisitely stark photography. Mr. Kobayashi does superb things with architectural composition, moving forms, and occasionally turbulent gyrations of struggling figures in the CinemaScope size screen. He achieves a sort of visual mesmeration that is suitable to the curious nightmare mood, and he uses his actors like weird puppets in this tensely drawn mise-en-scène. You may not get much satisfaction from the tortured human drama in this film, but you should get an eyeful graphic exercise. I don't think
I'm always struck by the amount of times that the New York Times is just off.
Yeah, no, it's Bosley Crowther. He's a fucking terrible film critic.
Is it the same guy each time?
Yeah, for the most part, Bosley Crowther, like, he's just fucking terrible. Like, he's just not a good film critic. That's welcome. Like that. I'm just gonna make that stand. He's just not. Bosley Crowther is a terrible film critic.
This man's still alive. This is a Henry Kissinger situation.
I don't think so. Hopefully he's dead. Hopefully he's dead in the ground, clutching the jazz singer or some shit.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, let's jump to Harakiri. Yeah, Grace, I'm gonna start with you because you were talking a little bit before we turned on the mic about like, you've seen a number of samurai films, but it's been a long time, and so this one was kind of you jumping back in, which is a very interesting one to jump back in with.
So yes, I have definitely been exposed to. I have memories seeing Hidden Fortress, Seven Samurais, and Hojimbo. But when I signed up for this episode, I knew immediately. I was like, okay, I want to watch a samurai movie, and then I want to watch this. So that's what I was telling you. I watched Lone Wolf and Cub, Sword of Vengeance, because it's on HBO Max. It's free. Let's watch a samurai movie. I'm not super familiar with the conventions, any of the lore. I'm not familiar with the history. So watching that, that came out in 1972, so 10 years after, right? Because this was 62 for Harakiri. So totally different. Much more pulpy, much more gory. There's this sort of superhuman quality to Ito Onagami that is the lone wolf assassin. How he can take on however many men and take them all out thanks to his sword fighting style. And then to go and watch this, and there's a more human quality to it. He takes Henshiro takes hits, he bleeds, he can only fight off so many people by himself.
He's not like a superhero.
Yeah, he's not a superhero. He uses his surroundings. He's throwing dirt in the eyes. So he's a scrapper. It was very good, but I wish that I would have not done that. I wish that I would have watched this first. I loved this. This was so good. This was so interesting, so sad. It's like a wonderful story. Definitely, it could be approachable as like a period drama. I mean, there's the family struggle. It felt familiar, and then it's action and samurai blood and guts. So I wish I would have started with this first, but this was great. And like how, cool to set up the entire genre, the entire convention, and then satirize it. Like, no, this shit sucks. Like the system, you go. Interrupt me.
No, you can. No, like it's interesting. Like also like as a, the samurai films are always it has a comparison with like Western films and things like that. So it's kind of interesting as like this. It doesn't work necessarily like with like Westerns you have like very traditional Westerns, but then you have like John Ford, who is probably like most synonymous with them, then making like almost like anti-Westerns with like The Searchers and Liberty Valance and things like that, where he's like commenting back on like his work to a large point. Even like more modernly, like Scorsese with gangster movies, like he made all these very like these are the gangster movies, Goodfellas, Casino, stuff like that, and then is making stuff like The Irishman, which is like kind of like a revisionist to a degree. And so it's interesting with Kobayashi, who like this is his first. Like it's not like he's not somebody like Kurosawa who like had like a long history of samurai movies and then like comes and like makes a kind of an anti-samurai movie. Like it's kind of interesting that he was able to pick up the genre and like and make kind of a response to the genre in general, like with his first movie
and with his main character.
Yeah. Michael, what did you think of the movie?
I thought it was really good. A lot of the insights that I had, you brought up during your intro, but I was like really fascinated by the ways in which it just seems to like be throwing a bomb into like power structures and hierarchies. And I don't know, like I love the structure of it. Like it starts off almost like Fable, like, right? Like where the guy just like walks up to the town and he's like, I'm gonna kill myself here. And like it's like almost like
they're like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just another day.
Well, no, what's funny is then they flash back to the other guy, because they're like, not one of these again, and like, like it's almost funny like how there's been like a rash of people pretending like they were gonna commit suicide so that they could be given money to stop or something. And I mean, it's obviously not funny because it's like a reflection of like the kind of like the way that culture is changing and how the kind of like hierarchy of like this kind of crumbling social structure has not set people up to like succeed in the next hierarchy that's being established. Like there's like something deeply tragic in that, but it's also just kind of funny. I don't know, like your little synopsis talked about how the guy, the first guy that we flash back to is the son-in-law of the other guy, but we don't find that shit out until like an hour into the movie, and it's like funny by the time you get there when he's like, actually, I knew him. And, yeah, exactly. Like
I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I can't believe this.
Right,
I thought that guy was a fraud.
And
like
I don't know. So there's something like, there's something very funny and almost like anarchic about it. Like it's in a way that's always very fun. Like there's like those types of movies where the kind of like conceit of the movie is as the movie goes on, it's revealed that like one character knows more than everybody else, and it's always fun to see that kind of like dawning thing happen. But then of course it's like a bummer at the end too. So,
you're talking about like how it's kind of throwing a bomb into conventions. I had recently rewatched The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance for the first time in a long time. And that's, very much kind of John Ford going, let me just break down all the stuff that like I built my career on for, years and years and years. And this felt like a perfect kind of like double feature with that to a degree. Cause it feels very much the same. Like, Liberty Valance is, Grace's friend behind her, John Wayne, is over there. Like a lot of the stuff that he does,
We'll
you know,
let
he's
him.
not, you know, he's
He
not
was there.
a good person. In the, it's, you know, he's very much like in line with like a Searcher's character. He's not a good person, but you know, he's able to at least recognize that he's kind of an aging relic of a time that like is never gonna like, you know, while Liberty Valance is like trying to like fight and hold on to like this kind of Wild West time, like Tom Donovan is very much like yeah, that's like it's gone because you know the railroad's coming, modernization is coming, like you know that time of us being able to just kind of settle things with guns and fists and stuff like that is just gonna go, like it's gonna go away. And it feels, and like I felt a lot of that in Harakiri where you know Tsugomo, the Hanshiro Tsugomo is just very much like, you know, he's gonna go out in a blaze of like samurai glory, like but he's also, but it's kind of him going like, this is just my last, like this, you know, this is all I can give, you know, as you know we're all about to like be, you know, become a product of a forgotten era.
Right. Well, and in fact, then the guns come out at the end. Like, yeah, like a real like, oh, you're not gonna be able to go out on your own terms. Like, in fact, the new order is gonna kill you.
Yeah, the modernization comes in, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna just shoot.
They
you
constantly
rather
deny
than,
him his
you know,
honor.
like you know, and it's also like honestly, as this, you know, it is a samurai movie, but it doesn't really. There's action sequences, but it's not like, you know, it's not, you know, you think of like, you know, the streets in Yojimbo where like the, you know, Kurosawa's showing like the sands kicking up, and you like get to watch like a whole like battle take place, and people, you know, blood's shooting everywhere, and people, you know, people's, you know, limbs are coming off and stuff. I mean, the actor who plays Hanshiro in this, it plays the like the shit brother in Yojimbo, who's like constantly fucking with Toshiro Mifune's character, the one who like has the gun tucked away, and yeah, like you don't really get any. You get a couple moments, like you have like the fight, like in the alleyway, and then he goes with the guy like out past the graveyard and stuff. Like you have, and then like the climax of it, you have like a fight, and that's
So
probably
cool.
the most like traditional. Like this is what you're kind of expecting out of a samurai movie, but really up to that point, you don't get any like oh hell yeah, like we're about to get into like a giant like battle that's gonna be, you know, fun. It always is like cutting right before like the actual like the cutting, you know, the kind of finishing happens.
It reminded me in that regard of Rashomon, not just in the sense of it kind of like undercuts the kind of sensual excitement of like battle, but also because of that like nested like story. Well, it's not really nested, but the way that you flash back to characters telling stories, and that like changes your perspective on like the other stories that have been told already, which I think is interesting. And in doing so, it presents this really bleak and almost nihilistic understanding of like the human experience, right? Like you're always like as the movie ends, it's like you're always going to be like under the thumb of the, you know, people who don't care about you, and their decisions that they make are going to have collateral damage that you like will be affected by, but they don't care about at all, you know? Because like the entire reason that the first guy in the flashback comes is that like his town has been like the governing system of his town has been abolished, right? Like, and so there's just like social disarray, and he comes to the town, and they clearly like don't care at all. They're like, oh, there's been so many of you guys like who are just like poor and pretending to commit suicide. Like, we're just gonna force you
We
to
have
die.
to set an example.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
like
We have to establish the new order
Right,
now.
and they don't-
like, this is how we deal with this.
they don't care about the extent to which that new order is creating this onslaught of people trying to commit ritual suicide. They just simply want to be in control. And it is really interesting to think about that in the context of like a post World War II, like kind of geopolitic, because that's kind of, I mean, that's any time period, but that's certainly the time period after World War II, where there's this huge sea change in like who are the major players in global politics, and the ways that like the United States and the USSR in particular act have all sorts of unintended or sometimes intended consequences on other nations, and they kind of just don't care, and I don't know. I don't know if specifically they were thinking, the filmmakers were thinking about that.
No, I think so, because I mean that's like in the research I was doing, like Kobayashi was very conscious of that, and like used a lot of, which it's making me really want to like go back and watch a number of his movies, because he's very conscious of that and is using the Japanese costume drama to like this nostalgia for a past era, in order, like he's using that construct to speak to what's happening at the in modern times for him, in the 50s and 60s in Japan, as they're coming out of the, we talked about it in part one, but like the desolation of the end of World War II, and becoming, his whole thing is, rather than fixing, we weren't right before that the war started. His point is like, yeah, we were doing horrible, heinous things to China and Korea and other places, and then we got into World War II and the US bombed us, and now we're like, shooken from it. But we should take, the lesson we should take is like we should learn and be better from the mistakes we made before. And his thing is like, no, you're using the new geopolitical structure and building up the same shit but in a different fashion. And he's like, yeah, that's wrong.
Have either of y'all seen The Human Condition?
No,
that's like his film that's about like militarized Japan, right?
Yeah, that's like what is it? It's like 7-8 hours. It's like
really
3 parts.
Long. I've never seen it, but I'm just curious what that movie's like.
It's on Criterion Channel. I'm debating about but it seems like you can break it into 3. Like there's 3 specific parts to it, so I think you can break it up into parts. But I was thinking about watching that, because I'm sure it's probably, just from watching this movie, it's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, because the only other movie of his that I've seen is Kwaidan, which is like a horror anthology. And I don't remember, it's been a couple years since I saw it. I don't remember it having those like political overtones like this one does, or I'm assuming The Human Condition does. But maybe I just need to go rewatch it.
Grace, what did you think of kind of the main, this main character, and kind of how his takedown of the system?
Deeply satisfying, and also super upsetting. He's denied his samurai blaze of glory at every turn. He's the only one left alive after series of unfortunate events, and he is the only one that's left to tell the story of his family. And then at the end, their history is erased. Their existence is gone. History is not, it seems like, history isn't really written by the victor. It's by who stays alive, who's still standing. And it's the Yi clan, or it's them. They are the ones. Yeah.
Yeah, for real.
And that was so cool. I mean, him, he picks up the armor. It's everything that they stand for. It's who they pledge their allegiance to. It's body armor. It's meant to protect, and it does protect him. They don't charge him. They put down your swords. We can't attack him. He's got the armor. He's holding up this system that we place so much belief and our faith in and pledge our allegiance to. He's holding it up, and he, throws it down. He throws it asunder and breaks it up, and this is what I think of your system. Smash. And then the guns come out. And it felt so cowardly, because it's like, you guys couldn't even do the thing that you're supposed to do. You guys couldn't even sword fight this man to the death. And you rely on guns. You rely on on a different type of weapon in a time of peace, right? So my cats are going crazy right now. They got zoomies. Sorry.
They're hyped up about this.
They're
guy.
hyped up. They're my Ronin. They're my Wuxia warriors. Like they're always a part of this. But it's in a the transition from wartime to peacetime, the destabilization. He's a wartime relic. He's a wartime weapon. And in times of peace, what do we use as our enforcer? Guns. That was so lame. It was so upsetting, but it was so, just like, this whole thing is Young Critics Watch as a, as a young critic, a young 27-year-old teenage critic. All I can think of, like, wow, this is amazing. The art and storytelling that's just on the other side of the world, on the other side of, subtitles, black and white. Like, there's so much good stories and art out there. You just can't be afraid. Don't let the black and white turn you off. Don't let the foreign film turn you off from it. But I always find myself like really lost in foreign films. Not like lost as in like confused, but I just lose my all sense of myself because I really have to. I can't look away. I'll miss something. I feel like, in a American or Western feature, whatever, I can hear it, but you have to listen, you have to read it, you have to watch and take it all in, and just got this overwhelming sense of like, what a movie.
Yeah. I want to come back to that in a second, but Grace reminded me of one thing that I wanted to talk about just in terms of the story, is in like the kind of comments on contemporary Japan, but you also have that whole the whole through line that kind of comes together, where they're not gonna, it happens at the very end where the leader of the clan is not gonna, like, he's like, the word is not gonna get out like what happened. We're gonna be like, oh, he like did what, he committed harakiri like he wanted to, and that was that. And these other everybody else was sick. The other samurai, they performed harakiri, like they're sick too. We don't know what happened. Like, just like, I thought that was also like apt, like the let's develop the narrative that we need to tell about this, because we can't say what actually happened, since the narrative is very disrupting to the social order.
But then, like, at the end, the servants are like cleaning everything up, and they're like looking at the like head knots that have been cut off, right? Like, there's something, I don't know, like there's something really interesting and almost profound about that too, where like, like there's official narratives, but the people who are like, the laborers are the people who actually can know the truth, because the leaders themselves are not going to clean up all the evidence, right? Like, and so by doing that, like there's cracks in that official narrative. I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool.
They're alive. I just humiliated them. Take that.
Oh my gosh, that was so good. That was because the whole time they're
He's
like,
been sick for a while.
Sick.
Like,
and
are you sure about that?
Everyone's kind of like, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
like,
Right.
He's sick too. I like the third.
No,
he says the third guy, and he's just
as
like,
he kept
give me a
naming
minute.
people. I'm like, wait, no, like,
sidebar.
Huh? You know these people by name? How do you know them? Why these three people? That was so fascinating. It's just these little like hints at, him like slowly revealing his hand.
Yeah, you mentioned Michael earlier. You mentioned Rashomon. This one, it's very different in terms of structure, but in terms of kind of like bouncing between like the past and the present. It like the structure of the narrative reminded me a lot of Rashomon, where like stuff would be you would kind of the narrative would be flowing along, and you're like, I think we've kind of figured it out. And then something else would be thrown in because of a different perspective, or this information that was left out before that then is added to it. It reminded me a lot of that movie. But yeah, so going back to what Grace was saying, just in terms of like, watching these narratives from non-Western movies. It also just, this is one that I've seen a lot, like listed in like the classics, and I think it's we talk about this in just about every Young Critics movie that we do, but this one, just another example of like, I think You know, this is something that I was thinking about when people were talking about the joke in Barbie about like The Godfather, about like it's The Godfather is very very much like one of those movies that it has all of this stuff, this narrative around it, and like you watch like the actual movie and then it's a good, you're like, yeah, like I understand why it like has this. You can debate whether you feel like it's, where it ranks in terms of, great movies, but you're like, it's worthy of like the discussion. It's, it's the same with like when they get into it with like about like Citizen Kane and stuff like that. But like this one, like I don't know, like it was another realization like while watching this, is just like, I think sometimes we don't approach like the classics that we see because we're just like, we've either seen so many references to them in other things and we kind of feel like we know. But then like, I think Rashomon's a good example of that. So many movies have kind of ripped off Rashomon ever since it came out. But like this one, it's just like a reminder of like this. I understand why this is a classic. Like this is like there's a reason it's so good. Like the use. I don't think we talked about it, but the use of like how Kobayashi like uses space in this movie, that house where the E clan is, like just those.
You said the theatricality and stagecraft,
and like
that house is so cool.
Well, it's getting torn apart. It's like it's this vast house with like all this beauty and like the rooms in it, but it's also just empty. Like the whole thing feels empty, and so it's also, again, it's just another layer to the commentary of just like, you have like this decadence and this facade of like, royalty and the samurai, the Ronin era, and all this stuff, but like now you're left in peace times, and it's just fucking empty. There's nothing there. And so like he's rolling through the house, and I think every room in that house is empty except for the room with the damn armor in it, and so it like makes that whole climax sequence even more effective because you're just like,
with is this system, this institution.
Yeah. Well, it's just you're just kind of upholding, like, what are you upholding now? Like, it's just, you have this empty house.
Yeah, the house comparisons, like from that one to the what they lived in the time of, in the flashback to the crappy little hut that they had to move to like the little bit bigger house that they lived in as a family, but it's still pretty bare and you can see through. Like there's not a lot of walls up. You can see everything. I thought that was interesting. Like everything in the clan house was like sectioned and partitioned, and you have to find your way through.
But no, like watching this, it's a reminder. Like, you'll watch some of the classics, especially the ones that you haven't got to, and more often than not, I feel like you'll watch it and you'll kind of go, yeah, I understand why this kind of like gets what, whatever praise or whatever recognition as. I think a lot of times we want to, you definitely want to like reevaluate and re-examine the canon. But with some of them, especially something like this, like you rewatch it, you're like, yeah, like this still has intrinsic value, not only on a stylistic cinematic level, but also like I think that narratively it speaks. Like that's something, in some of the the earlier ones we watched, like something like The Jazz Singer, like we got into it like, are the technical innovations and the cinematic innovations that it's heralded for, like does that have merit, and then like does the narrative still speak? And like you can kind of debate that, but I'm like, with this one I can see why this is a classic, because I think all of that stuff still holds up and is still as powerful in 2023 as it was on a cinematic and narrative level in 1962.
Yeah, definitely. Have any of y'all seen, this movie was remade in like 10 years ago maybe?
Yeah, Takashi Miike made it.
It kept popping up. I kept trying to stream Harakiri, and it's like, Harakiri, Death of a Thief or whatever, and it's like, leave me alone. I want the real deal.
I do kind of want to watch the Takashi Miike remake.
He's like he's not just some sort of like fly-by-night dude.
No,
like he's...
Yeah. No, honestly, I will probably see if I can watch that, because like Takashi Miike, you're like, all right, like that sounds... There's going to be some blood in that one.
Although I will say, like the original was way bloodier than I thought. Like the scene where the guy has to actually
with the bamboo.
Like,
it was hard to watch.
Like really gross.
And the guy's just like, finish it.
And loud.
Yeah, it was very loud. A lot of fluids. turns out, disemboweling yourself is not very pleasant.
No, it's not. Any final thoughts? Any lingering thoughts on Harakiri before we wrap up?
Oh, I remember how in last week's episode I showed you guys like when I was looking up Harakiri, like one of the Google searches is like most commonly associated with or searched with. It's like, why is Harakiri so good? Do you guys think we answered that?
I understood why.
I think so.
After
Yeah.
watching it.
Yeah, we know why it's so good. So you guys should go out and you should watch and then
fill out the
you'll
Google.
agree.
We should go
It
and
is so
respond to
good.
the Google searches and be like, yeah, this is why.
Yeah, it's
Why
like
is
some sort of
Harakiri
like
so
forum
good?
page or something.
Because go listen to Cemetery's podcast.
We'll flex some SEO and we'll work. Why is Harakiri so good in the SEO of this podcast? So then maybe when they search that, they'll just find this episode.
That's it. Yeah.
There we go.
So we don't even need to, commit seppuku to get money. We just
get views.
Manipulate SEO.
That's the nature of the game. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, that'll wrap up this episode.
another
You can
day.
find us on Facebook at facebook.com/cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle @cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/cinematary, where we will talk about, or we list all the episodes, all the movies that we talked
the
about in this
movies.
episode, but also all the episodes, because we have those too. If you'd like to support the show, with or without us performing seppuku, you can go to patreon.com/cinematary.
going
Thank
first.
you so much to our patrons, Cam, Chad Newsom, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marsathi, and Tyler Chandler. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Next episode, we're gonna have one. We're gonna do one, and that is we're gonna take the dive into Sallow, or the 120 Days of Sodom.
Oh my
Nice.
god.
And it's Michael, it's you, me, and Andrew. So what a group
Hell
to
yeah.
experience Sallow together.
That's right. That's what this podcast is made
I
for.
can choose
What?
my battles. I
No,
couldn't
I'm
do it.
jealous of Grace.
I couldn't do it. I said, no. Catch you on the
I
next
don't
one,
remember
guys.
if it was
You
me
got
or
this.
Andrew who put it on this time, but it's been in the
It has
poll
been.
a few years in a row.
I'm honestly surprised, like, that it wasn't voted, because that seems like a perfect movie. Like, if somebody's saying, like, that's a perfect, like, haha, fuck you vote. So that's how I felt this time.
Oh, yeah.
But here we are. So that's, get ready for that, folks. Until then, thanks y'all for listening. We'll see you next episode.